What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Closing the Deal. I am one of your hosts, Zach Dixon, and today we will be doing another solo episode, part 4 of our How to Buy a Home series. Today's episode is about making an offer. Let's get started. So again, guys, this is part 4 of our How to Buy a Home series. We have done 3 episodes so far. One on surrounding yourself with the right team. Second is getting pre-approved. And third was the house hunt. And now today we are discussing making an offer on a property that you find and are ready to purchase. So again, guys, if you have not already checked out our first few episodes of the series, please do so before you check out this one. It will get you up to speed and make sure that you are understanding everything that we are discussing in this episode. And so you are prepared for your home buying journey and making sure that you're doing the proper steps before you start to make an offer. Now, I know this is the stage that gets everybody super excited during the home search, and rightfully so. Obviously, when you make an offer, you are almost going into contract to purchase a home. Obviously, you need the seller's acceptance as well, but it's one step in the right direction. This part 4 of this stage is very crucial overall in the home buying process because, again, a strong offer can make all of the difference between landing your dream home or losing it out to another buyer. Especially in the market that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, a strong offer can make all of the difference. So the first step to making an offer is going to be understanding your market as a whole. Really, your market is going to dictate how you get started with making your offer. Is it going to be a buyer's market or are you in a seller's market? These are things that we have to discuss between your real estate agent and you as the buyer to make sure that we're on the same page as to how we want to approach making an offer on this home. Making an offer will change dramatically if we are in a seller's market or if we're in a buyer's market. We want to make sure that we are fully understanding how the market is operating around us prior to writing up any offers or making any offers in specific. So just touching on those two types of markets a little bit, I know that we did just do a Wednesday word of the day on buyers and sellers markets, but again, in a buyer's market, there are more homes than buyers. So there are a lot of different choices. There is a lot of inventory on the market, and buyers are going to have a lot of choices in their home search. And again, this leads to stronger negotiation power for the buyers. This is why it's called a buyer's market. And on the flip side, for a seller's market, there are less homes than buyers. Demand outpaces supply, and that is reflected in prices. Those prices go up, and usually you are going to see bidding wars and multiple offers on properties in a seller's market. In a seller's market, much of the negotiation power is held by the sellers, and it is more beneficial for them as a whole. So if we're in a buyer's market and we see a property that's been on the market for, about 100 days or so, we've had a little bit of price reductions on it, but you're ready to make an offer on it, that would change dramatically based on it being a buyer's market. Now, if it was a seller's market, we would approach the offer completely differently. But being in a buyer's market, seeing that the property has been on the market for almost 100 days and we've seen a couple of price reductions, we can put that into our strategy in making an offer, and will look a lot different than it would if it was in a seller's market. Another part of understanding your market is going to be how to determine a fair market price. Now, when the home is listed by a listing agent, typically they're going to run a comparative market analysis to determine the fair value of the home. They're going to take the subject property, determine its bedrooms, its bathrooms, its square footage, any specific amenities in the property, and we're going to try and find similar properties within probably a half-mile or a mile radius that are very similar to our subject property, and see what those have sold for in the last 6 to 12 months. If we can find similar properties to our subject property, we're able to pretty much lock down a give or take value, I should say, based on what other properties in the area have sold for previously in the last 6 to 12 months. Now, as a buyer's agent, obviously, we're not going to just take the listing agent's word for it. We're going to also run our own comps and make sure that the property is listed correctly and make sure that we see that it's going to appraise for the number that we are in contract for. If we can't find comps in the area for the same price as our subject property, it's likely not going to be worth that much. At that point, it may be worth having a conversation with the listing agent, trying to find out where their comps came from, where their pricing strategy is, and we can kind of work from there. Another item, a part of understanding your market that has kind of become a new normal, I think, in our real estate market over the last 5 to 10 years is online estimates. So when you get on Zillow.com, you're going to see a Zestimate, and that is an estimate price based on Zillow's algorithm. And sometimes that's accurate and sometimes it's not. I will always recommend talking with a real estate agent, making sure that they're running comparative market analysis across all of their platforms and resources to make sure that they are determining a good market value. You can use Zillow.com for a reference, but I would not use it as your only reference at all. Again, run comparative market analysis, find comps, and use the resources that your real estate agent has, and those will be what you want to determine, that fair market value. Use real world data, not necessarily algorithms from these technology companies. So lastly, finishing up with understanding the market as a whole. I touched on it a little bit already, but days on market and seller motivation is going to be a big factor when we are determining an offer as a whole. Obviously, if the property has been on the market for only 2 days, there's a lot less negotiation power on that property. Now, if we see the property's been on the market for almost 100 days, the seller probably has a little bit more motivation to sell the property as a whole, no matter what the price and what the terms are, to get it out of their hands, out of their hair, and no longer worried about it. Obviously, when a property's on the market for only 2 days or so, again, that doesn't give very much time for buyers to go out and check it out, make offers, et cetera, et cetera. So when we see properties that have been on the market for a long time, properties that have, had multiple price reductions, we can make an inference that the seller is motivated to get that property sold, and we can, make our offer and construct our offer based on that fact right there. Moving on to our next step in making an offer, it's going to be constructing it as a whole and what the key elements of the offer as a whole are. Obviously, first and foremost, what's most important to everybody, between buyers and sellers and everybody, is going to be your offer price. So that's going to start out obviously around or at your asking price. Just depends again on those comparative market analysis comps and making sure that the property is priced correctly. But again, typically we're within 5 to 10% either way, below or above asking price when we are making that offer. Another term that I've seen in an offer, more so I would say lately in the hot market that we've seen, is an escalation clause. An escalation clause states that you as the buyer will go up above the highest other offer that the seller receives based on the fact of them receiving it. So a good example would be that you offer $150,000 on the property. You write in the contract that you have an escalation clause up to $175,000 every $500. So if another buyer offers on the same property at $170,000, your offer automatically goes to $170,500. Now, with the escalation clause, your max would be $175,000. So if somebody offered $175,000, you would be stuck at $175,000 as well. This allows you as a buyer to not necessarily know what other people are offering, but have a backup plan just in case somebody else comes in above your offer. Another common term that I see within the purchase contract is going to be your earnest money deposit. And again, we did a Wednesday word of the day series on this as well. So definitely go check out that video. I believe it was a couple of weeks ago. And so an earnest money deposit is going to be similar to a security deposit. I would think of it as a good faith payment when making an offer and going into contract. So if you write in your contract that you would pay a $1,000 earnest money deposit upon acceptance of the contract, once that seller signs and sends back an executed purchase contract, you are now both in contract, and now you need to deposit $1,000 with your buyer broker that is going to be held until closing and then paid back to you at closing and applied to the deal. This is really just to get some skin in the game as a buyer for you and show the sellers that you are serious and that you are willing to, put a little bit of your own money in to buy this property up front right away. So really the only time that the seller would take this money is if you exit out of the contract for a reason not specified in the contract. Generally speaking, if a contract terminates, it's going to be because of a contingency in the contract. So at that point, you will get your earnest money deposit back. But again, just think of it as a good faith deposit that shows the seller that you're serious and that you get back at closing and gets credited toward the cash to close that you need to bring to the closing table. The last step of our key elements of the offer is going to be your financing. Obviously, this is a huge step in the process and one that needs to be figured out prior to making an offer. Are you going to be financing your property, or are you going to be paying all cash? A lot of buyers are going to be financing. So at that point, we 100% need to make sure that we are pre-approved. And again, that was part 2 of our how to buy a home series here. And again, we need to make sure that happens prior to making an offer, number one, but more importantly, prior to seeing any properties as well in the out in the open. Because again, you don't want to be falling in love with properties that that you don't even know you can afford or not. So make sure that you are getting pre-approved prior to, getting out to see properties, and more specifically for this episode, making an offer. So moving on to some more key elements of our offer is going to be contingencies. Your typical contingencies are going to be financing, home sale, and appraisal contingencies. Again, you want to make sure that you have these contingencies in your purchase contract to protect you. For if any reason that you are unable to obtain financing, having that financing contingency allows you to back out of that contract with no penalty to you, and you get your earnest money deposit back. So again, make sure that you have these contingencies in your purchase contract to make sure that you are protecting yourself prior to making an offer. And there are instances where you would waive these. Again, I would say, generally speaking, in a seller's market where the market is very hot, the seller has multiple offers on their property, waiving these contingencies shows a path of least resistance for the seller. There are not really any objections to be able to getting this property to the finish line and closing table when there's no contingencies in the contract. So it just shows, the sellers that you are willing to take on a little bit more risk and take on a path of least resistance to get to the closing table. Another common element of your purchase contract and making an offer is going to be inspections. Again, want to make sure that you have inspections done on your property, even if you don't plan on asking the seller to fix anything. This is great information to have as a homeowner prior to making your home purchase. So you just are well aware of any issues, underlying issues, or problems that are going on with the property as a whole. You want to make sure that you know about these things, you're well prepared, and can fix them if needed, even throughout your home ownership, and not necessarily even if the seller is going to fix those. A typical home inspection is going to happen, probably within 7 days of contract acceptance. And then after that, you typically will have a request to remedy period that will last another 3 days after the inspection period. The request to remedy period is a time for renegotiation based on the inspection results, and can lead to repairs being done, purchase price being reduced, or seller concessions being given as a whole. Really, the last thing that we need to pay attention to when we are making our offer is our closing timeline. If you're doing financing, a 30-day window is really the shortest time period that you should feel comfortable with making an offer on. I would say generally speaking, 30 to 45 days is a great time period to write into your contract. Again, this also depends on the market conditions as a whole. Quicker closings for sellers are always welcomed, and that is always what they're going to be looking for. A seller does not want to necessarily hold on to the property any longer than they absolutely have to. So extending a closing out further than it needs to be isn't an advantage for the seller as a whole. So you made an offer, and now the seller has sent you back a counter offer. What exactly happens here with this negotiation period? So after you make an offer, sellers typically respond usually within 12 to 24 hours, depending on the day or time that you sent your offer in. Sometimes if sellers receive multiple offers, they will set a offer deadline and show everybody that has seen the property and give them all equal opportunity to write an offer by the specific date and time. So when you send your offer in, the seller can do three things with that. They can accept it, they can reject it, or they can counter it. Obviously, the first two are very self-explanatory. If you are accepted, you're going into the in-contract portion of the How to Buy a Home series. If you're rejected, it's time to move on to the next property. Now, what happens if the seller counters your offer? This all is a negotiation. As I've said many, many times before on our podcast and content, everything in real estate is a negotiation. If they counter back with a little bit higher price, you can maybe pay that higher price, but take another term down to what you deem as an advantage to you or a win to you. Again, everything is a negotiation. Make sure that you have a strong real estate agent on your team going to bat for you and making sure that all bases are being covered for you as a buyer. And following up on that as well, your real estate agent is going to know when to stand firm in the ground, feet in the sand, not moving, and when to push back a little bit and change the terms or give the seller what they want a little bit. Again, there's a very, very fine line with these items here. So make sure that you have a very experienced and very skilled negotiator on your team as your real estate agent to make sure that you are getting the very best deal possible when you get into these counteroffer situations. And again, just like I mentioned already, past just the price, there are things that can be adjusted to make to be beneficial for you as the buyer. Again, if the price gets upped a little bit, you could push the closing out just a little bit longer, so you have a little bit more time to save up a little bit more down payment to cover that increase in price. Or you can add a home warranty in the offer because the price got increased as well. A home warranty will protect you as the buyer for up to a year if any of your big ticket items quit working at all. So again, if you get a counter offer back where the price was increased from your initial offer, there are other terms that can be changed to account for that fact as well. So make sure that you're discussing these items with your real estate agent and make sure that they are checking all of these boxes prior to accepting that counter offer that you get back. And again, as a whole, this period is all about negotiation. I can't state it enough. Real estate is all a negotiation. Make sure that you are taking advantage of that fact, but not stepping over the line too far, but getting what you want out of the deal and out of the property. So that is really it, guys. Again, that makes up the making an offer as a whole and what we will be looking for when we are writing this purchase contract up. So now that your offer has been accepted, you are now officially in contract and ready to get started on all of the items that we kind of just discussed on to get this ball rolling and moving and get to the closing table and get that property purchased. So again, guys, this was part 4 of our How to Buy a Home series, making an offer. The next part of our series will be the in-contract process that both Sam and I will cover on that episode. again, there are a lot of moving parts once you get into contract, and the pre-contract process is really just half of the battle when you get into purchasing your home and getting to that closing table. There are a lot of things that need to be done on both sides for your financing and on the real estate side of things to finally get to that closing table. And again, most of that is the reason why we have a 30 to 45 day contract window period in our contract to make sure that all of these items can get finished and taken care of in a timely manner prior to closing. So again, guys, thanks for tuning in to today's episode. I really, really appreciate you guys. Again, tuning into our content as a whole and the podcast as a whole, but especially this How to Buy a Home series. We really feel like a lot of buyers get started in their home buying journey without the proper guidance, proper information, and again, getting started with the right steps to begin with, and not necessarily starting with step 4 and going back to step 1 is a very important point of the process as well. So again, if you guys have not already checked out our first few episodes of the series, please do so. And again, feel free to leave us a comment, like, subscribe, and share. We really appreciate all of the feedback and love and support that we've had on the channel as well. So thanks again, guys, for tuning in to today's episode, and we will see you guys on the next one.